the wall, we have the owners of the house, Lowell and Agnes Walter. Mr. Walter was actually a native of Quasqueton. He was born and raised here. And after he graduated from high school, he moved to the Des Moines area where he attended business college there and met his wife, Agnes. She was originally from Humboldt, Iowa. And after they graduated, they married and bought a little place in Des Moines, Iowa. And interestingly, they kept that house their entire married life. The home that we're in right now was actually their summer home, and it was built between 1948 and 1950. But Lowell and Agnes started up the Iowa Road Building Company, and Mr. Walter had a patent on a product called bituminous oil seal, which is kind of a mixture of oil that they would put around gravel roads, and that would keep the dust down, and it also hardened somewhat to almost make a pavement type surface. So that's where they made their wealth, I guess you could say. But in addition to that, they also owned about 5,000 acres of farmland here in Buchanan County, and they started doing that basically to help some relatives initially, and then when other people were going through a difficult time, they started buying up other farmland, and as I said, they ended up with 5,000 acres here. In the meantime, they're living in Des Moines, right? So they decided they need to have a place here to kind of keep an eye on how things are going. And they just were friends of Frank Lloyd Wright. Mr. Wright, or Mr. Walter rather, would put that bituminous oil seal down all over in the Midwest, and that is probably where he became familiar with Mr. Wright, or at least Mr. Wright's work. Anyway, he really liked that, and he contacted Wright by letter and asked Mr. Wright if he'd be interested in building a house here. And he told him a little bit about the grounds. Mr. Wright wrote back pretty quickly, actually. It was just 3 lines, but he said, "Yes, I will build you a house. There will be no basement, no attic. Send further details." So Mr. Wright, when they commissioned him to do this, they commissioned Mr. Wright to do everything. They wanted a turnkey house. They just wanted to be able to move in. So that means that everything that you see in this house, Mr. Wright had a hand in some way or other. I mean, he designed the furniture, he picked out the building materials, which is primarily brick and steel and glass and wood, and he picked out where the house and how it was going to sit here on the site. And so this is the entryway of the home, obviously. And you'll notice that this is a pretty dark area, and that's typical, right? You would often come into a dark area like this, and then you are like drawn into the next room, which is just filled with lots of expanse and lots of light. Mr. Wright called this compression and expansion. And he designed over 500 structures worldwide. And it wasn't just residences. I mean, he did businesses, and he did theaters, and he did gas stations and schools, and I mean, just almost any type of building you can think of, he designed. But most of those structures had the same type of element. You would come into the dark, and then you were drawn into the light. And it's just kind of a low area. Obviously, it's not an area that you're going to be in for a long time. This would be a place where the Walters would greet you. Maybe if you had dirty shoes, it'd be a place you could sit down, take off your shoes, and then you would go into the next room. And what you're looking at right now is called a raw glass display. And that is just pieces of colored glass that Mr. Wright got from the Corning Glass Company in New York. And Mr. Wright is pretty well known for his stained glass windows. And while we didn't get a stained glass window in our house, he did use this. And it kind of gives you the same sense of a stained glass window. And those are just pieces of colored glass that he backlit. And right down below it is a little desk table. If you pan over a little bit, you might be able to see the old phone. So they could sit there and answer the phone. Mr. and Mrs. Walter had a party line. You got a mirror, which kind of helps spread light. And so this is a very compressed area, but if you look forward, you can just see, look at the difference. And if you go in a little bit further, you will see that it just draws you into that beautiful area. Okay, now we're looking down the hallway of the home. Again, it's a very, very dark area, But when you get into the bedrooms, which are the rooms on the left, they too are just filled with all this natural light. And these are very tiny rooms. The garden room, the room that we just saw, that room, believe it or not, is 900 square feet. That is half the square footage of this house. Why? Because that's where Mr. Wright said the Walters would be spending the majority of the time. But, you know, at night, you're going to bed. And this hallway is dark and dim like this, and it just kind of puts you in the mood to sleep. And there is 52 feet of storage down the right-hand side of the hallway. Wow. All the wood in this home, it's a beautiful wood. It's called Missouri walnut. And Mr. Wright picked that out as well. He loved the grain in the wood, and when you come and visit us, most people are just in awe of how beautiful that wood is. Great. Right, in addition to the house, some other things that are pretty exciting to see on the site, again, all designed by Wright. We have a council fire, which is a very large outdoor barbecue area with a huge, huge grill in the middle. When the Walters were renting out farms, they would have a big celebration, and they would invite all of their renters up to the council fire, and he'd provide all the food and the drink and everything else, but it was just a nice place to gather around the fire. There's also the boathouse, which is located right on Cedar Rock, where this site is named for. Cedar Rock has just always been known locally as Cedar Rock, and it's basically just a huge rock, and a cedar tree grows out of it, but on that rock is a boathouse that Mr. Wright designed. The only remaining boathouse that is still in its original form. He did 10 over the course of his career. We also have maids' quarters. Nowadays, the political term would probably be a guest house. The Walters did not have any maids, but we also have a maids' quarters. And there's also the original green cabin on the site. The Walters wanted to be here while Mr. Wright was constructing the home, and so the little green cabin they stayed in is also here. And the entrance gate, you can see it when that's not the gate that you come in. You'll come into the gate that takes you up to the visitor center, but you will pass another gate, and that gate was also designed by Mr. Wright. Right now we're looking at a bright red tile there in the brick wall. This is a really, really cool house. This is one of the few signed Frank Lloyd Wright homes that you will see, or buildings I should say. And that's because the couple that hired him to do this gave him permission to do basically whatever he wanted to do. So everything inside the house, Mr. Wright either designed, chose, or gave permission for it to be there. He did all of the landscaping around the house. He selected the building materials for the house. He just did everything, and he actually signed this house. To Wright, you know, this is a piece of art as well as a place to live in, and so it's just kind of like an artist signing their painting. So this is the entrance to the home, and right up here, if you want to get a close-up, you'll see a QR code. Now I gave you the time that we're open, but if you want to come here and just walk around the house, we've got like 3 miles of trails. If you just want to view the exterior of the house, we have these QR codes, you know, around the building, and if you zap that with your phone, that'll give you some information about what you're seeing.